Well, I think the capacity for evil is something that is not easily distinguishable from strength. You know, and I mean, my knowledge runs out at this level of analysis in some sense. The world seems to be structured so that we can act for the good and we can act for evil. And I think that's associated with self-consciousness. And I think that's illustrated in the story of Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve become self-conscious, the scales fall from their eyes. They realize that they're naked. And to realize that you're naked is to understand your vulnerability. That's why Adam and Eve clothed themselves right away. Oh no, I'm naked, I can be hurt. Okay, I can be hurt. I have to clothe myself, I have to protect myself in the future. You actually become aware of that in a way that animals aren't. Well, what does it mean that you're naked? It means that everyone else is too. Yeah. What does it mean that you can be hurt? It means that everyone else can be hurt too. It means that you could hurt them. And that's why the knowledge of good and evil goes along with the knowledge of nakedness. That took me a long time to figure out. It took me about 30 years to figure that out. So why are those two things conjoined? Oh yes, when you understand that you're vulnerable, you understand that everyone else is vulnerable, and then you have the option of exploiting that. And so that's what transforms human beings to some degree from animals, because a predator just eats you, but a human being can play with you and will for all sorts of reasons. Now, the capacity to do that, though, why is the capacity to do that, let's say, useful? Well, it's useful to be strong and not to have to use it. That reflects something that we talked about earlier, because it makes you formidable. And I think that you have to be formidable in order to move forward properly in the world, even to get through obstacles that aren't. Just to get through obstacles, you have to have some strength of character. You have to have some commitment. And some of that is, there will be a cost if you interfere with me. It'll be the minimal cost necessary. Let's say if you've got yourself under control. It will be the minimal cost necessary. But do not be thinking there won't be a cost. And I don't believe that if that's not built into your character, then you have no strength, and you certainly have no strength when you're pushed by someone who's malevolent. A bully, if you're like that, if the bully pushes you and your response is, there will be a cost for pushing me and you will pay it, then the bully will go elsewhere. And we know that too from studies of bullies. You know, like even childhood bullies, they push around kids, and then they find the ones that retreat and withdraw, and they bully them. So, and you know, you might think, well, usually children are bullied because of some abnormality. That's a very common idea. It's like, there's a guy named Dan Olweus, a very smart Norwegian psychologist, and he studied bullying for a long time as a precursor to fascism, by the way, so that was his interest. He said his analysis indicated that at least 3/4 of children have some obvious abnormality that could be the focus of bullying attention. It might even be your name. It doesn't take much of a genius bully to come up with a good way of making fun of your name, or you're too tall, or you're too short, or you know, or your brother's too tall or too short, or there's something. It isn't the abnormality that is the cause of the bullying. It's the abnormality might become the focus of the bullying, but part of the cause is the withdrawal in the face of the bullies, because the bully thinks he can get away with it. Well, if you're, and it's also the case with children who are preyed upon by adult predators. Like adult predators of children look for children who are easily cowed and who won't put up a fight. So for example, if you're teaching your children to be terrified of strangers, that's really not a very good strategy. You want kids who are confident and who will make a noise if someone messes about with them, and who are, and so that characterological strength has to be built in. This is how I think reality lays itself out. I think we all know this. You're not driven by your past like a clock. You're not deterministic. You are to some degree, because you're a limited creature. You've got rules that you run by and all of that. You know, you're not omniscient. But you're not driven by the past. What you do instead is confront the potential of the future. That's what's in front of you. So it's a domain with multiple pathways, and that's what's always in front of you. You could go there, you could go there, you could go there. There's an array of choices that confront you. You confront that as soon as you wake up and become conscious in the morning. And then there's all this potential that's there in front of you. And you use your ethical choice to determine which of those possibilities will become actual. And it's through that mechanism that you participate in the creation of reality. And that's the making of you in the image of God. Because that's what God did at the beginning of time, according to our old stories, right? Spoke and transformed potential into the being that was good. And that was dependent on using truthful speech. So that's what you do if you act properly, is you confront potential and you translate it into reality. And it's your soul that does that. Well, do you follow the story? That's a fundamental religious question. You know, when people go to see a movie like Pinocchio, which is a movie I've taken apart online in some detail, it's like they suspend disbelief. No one thinks that a wooden puppet has become alive. No one questions why the wooden puppet should rescue his father from the chaos of the whale. It all just makes sense. It's like, well, yeah, but why does it make sense exactly? And isn't it interesting to notice that it makes sense? And these stories have a pattern, and the pattern has a function, and that's a religious function. You say, well, I don't know whether I believe. It's like, well, you follow the story. The Harry Potter books are a good example of that, because they have a deeply, deeply religious substructure. And that's why they were so insanely popular. You know, they have to speak for a book to become that popular. It has to speak to something that's in everyone. Because otherwise, why would they become that popular? You know, and in the second volume, Harry confronts the basilisk, the thing that turns you to stone, that lurks underneath the magic castle. It's like, well, that's life, that's Jaws. It's the same story. It's like we have a structure. It's kind of magical. We live inside it. It's a hierarchy. But underneath, there's chaos and terror. And that can come up at any time and paralyze you with its gaze, right? Turn you to stone because it's so awful. And every building is like that. And so what you have to do is you have to go down into the depths and confront that thing voluntarily. And then you find, and you'll find what's of great value in that pursuit. And be reborn. It's like, well, that's the Harry Potter story. That's the second volume. It's like, well, everyone knows that story. Do you believe it? Well, do you act it out? That's the question. Do you act it out? It's the right pattern. I think, and maybe it's not even the right pattern. Maybe the human race is a hopeless race, and there's no destination for us. But for better or worse, that's our pattern. Our pattern is the snakes are after us. Well, we can cower in our dens, or we can go out and we can find the source of the snakes, and we can contend with it. And that's what we decided to do. And God only knows how long ago, millions of years, we decided we weren't going to cower in our dens. We were going to go out and root out the snakes. It's like St. Patrick or St. George. And then we found, well, there was the snakes that will eat you. And then there were the snakes that were in other people's hearts. And then there were the snakes that were in your hearts. And all of those had to be contended with and rooted out. And that's part of the even deeper mythology. Is that like there's an association in Christianity between the snake in the Garden of Eden and Satan. It's like, well, where did that come from? What kind of crazy idea is that? Well, I just laid out the idea. It's like there's always a snake. What's the worst possible snake? Well, it isn't an actual snake. It's a metaphorical snake. It's the snake that's in the heart of your enemy when he comes to burn down your city. Well, what if you get rid of your enemies? Well, the snake's still there. Well, then it's in your heart. So what's the ultimate battle? The ultimate battle is with the snake in your heart. I had this kid talk to me at a barbecue I was at this weekend, and he's working with delinquent kids, 13 and 14 years old. And he said they were pulled out of other delinquent camps and brought to his camp, which was for the worst delinquents. And he started talking to them about my lectures. And so they've been watching him, and now they have a little fan club that's based around my lectures, and they're doing things like talking to each other about making their beds and cleaning up their rooms. It's like, it's unbelievable how little genuine encouragement many people need, and how they had none. No one ever said to them and meant it. It's not okay for you to be a weak loser. It's not okay. And the reason it's not okay is because you could be way more than that. And it's a crime, an ethical crime, for you to allow all that necessary potential to go to waste. It hurts you, It hurts your family. It hurts the world. Really, really, it does.